This is David Taub with a GV Wire interview. I'm here with the Armenian ambassador to America, Grigor Hovhannissian. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, David.
First of all, just tell us a little bit about the role. You're based in Washington?
Yeah, Embassy of Armenia to the United States obviously should be in the capital, so the embassy is in Washington, obviously.
And you're visiting Fresno because obviously Fresno known for its Armenian community. What do you think? What are your impressions of Fresno thus far?
This is not my first trip to Fresno. Years ago, I was consul general in Los Angeles, and this area was part of my consular district, and having large Armenian population, lots of economic, cultural, and bilateral ties with the Fresno and Fresno County. Obviously, I would travel quite regularly, so I'm not entirely new to this area. Obviously, it has both the culture, it has the community factor, which is important for us, and I just love it, all of it. San Joaquin Valley with its phenomenal agriculture, with the universities, with which we have very strong relations with the authorities at the city level, the supervisors. So there's lots of history. I mean, Fresno's home to Armenian institutions. There's a theater group, all sorts of. William Saroyan, obviously, that is the very serious and strong bond that links us. You know, we have Saroyan statue in Yerevan, in the heart of our capital. Fresno's home to statue of David of Sassoon, which is the epic hero. I mean, a myriad of individual and institutional links between Armenia and Fresno.
All right, now talking about some international things. President Trump, a lot of work he's done in his first week. Well, as your position as ambassador and from the position of Armenia, what do you make first of the wall or the ban of Muslim immigrants from 7 different countries?
Obviously, all of us, all countries, observe significant changes to the U.S. approaches to international affairs. Security is one of the overarching issues that has been defining policy of many governments. The U.S. government has the right to institutionalize some measures that would enhance the protection. Obviously, we hope that those are restrictive measures are temporary, so that process of globalization, processes for integration of dialogue and cooperation are back to where they were left before the situation got really out of control in the Middle East and some other places in the world. So we do take it with a lot of understanding. There's a growing threat of terrorism. Has been terrorist activity in many countries. U.S. was fortunately spared and enhanced. There's never enough security. So if there's new administration prioritizes security measures as to prevent possible, attacks against U.S. citizens or interests, that we take it with understanding. As we hear, it is a temporary measure for the time being. But essentially, eventually, we hope things will go back, especially when it comes to refugees, people who seek asylum. That's a fundamental part of the international humanitarian law. But as I said, it's the U.S. administration acts in what is the best interest of U.S. to protect its security, its borders, and its national interests.
Prior to becoming ambassador to America, you served as ambassador to Mexico. What is your take on President Trump's insistence on building the wall?
NAFTA was a framework which was in many ways, if not exemplary, but it created precedent of a free trade agreement between neighboring countries. And I was, as ambassador to Mexico, I saw that was very beneficial for the Mexican economy. This being said, the U.S. has legitimate concerns about immigration, and there's if building a wall is part of new policy, how to contain illegal movement of of migrants, not just Mexicans, but there's a massive movement from South Africa, and Mexico oftentimes is a transit country. So it's a new development that we factor in. We note that development, and there's no other take that foreign country like Armenia can have on that. This is an internal sovereign decision by U.S. government, and there's nothing illegal about that. Every country has. If you talk, because distances are large, you don't see many countries in our part of the world, in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Middle East, they have those walls. Because we are nation states. You're not used to that situation. We don't have. Sometimes those walls are made of concrete or brick. Sometimes those are wired by. There's all sorts of installations. So those walls exist between many nations, many countries, and in our case, we feel like border protection, very rigorous border protection, is one of the factors contributing to national security. So there can't be any other take on that. If sovereign government decides how to manage, immigration or illegal immigration flows.
Now, is it appropriate diplomacy for President Trump to expect Mexico to pay for the wall? You've been a diplomat working on both sides of the border. Mexico's clearly stated their view; they're not going to pay for it. So how would you solve this diplomacy problem?
Obviously, for the outside world, and for someone who lived in Mexico and who also loves the United States, I would very much like to see these both countries cooperate. Anything that does on a bilateral basis needs to be based on bilateral agreement. So if this happens based on bilateral agreement, which I hope there's going to be some kind of agreement, then it would be a good thing for the continent, because if North American continent grows economically, that's good for the rest of the world. We also see and feel the benefits of that, So we hear that there's a positive talk between the presidents yesterday, and we're in that sense we're upbeat that this issue will be resolved through a dialogue and compromise or agreement.
Finally, Mr. Ambassador, how is Donald Trump being played in Armenia? Was he considered a celebrity before? How is Armenia viewing President Trump?
There's opinion polls showed that both candidates had similar approval rate in Armenia. So both candidates had their fans. Obviously, like elsewhere in the world, Armenians also followed the developments in the campaign. Historically, the first settlers, the first Armenian communities in the United States were Republicans. So that kind of defines the overall attitude of Armenians towards U.S. processes. So I would say it was evenly split between the two candidates. That was and that was not. Armenia was not unique in that sense. In many countries in Europe and Eastern Europe, and that was the pattern, how the sympathies of people go with.
Ambassador, thank you so much. For GB Wire, this is David Taub.